What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and I saw a post recently about someone talking about the rarity of a book that they got and why this book is, so rare, a unicorn, this kind of thing. And I wanted to talk about this one because I've mentioned in a prior video that I've been seeing some newer collectors into the hobby. And been seeing posts on Facebook, on Reddit, and that's great. I love seeing new people get in the hobby. I've said it in the other video. You need new people in the hobby or the hobby dies, right? And so I thought I would address some of these comments or posts that I see where I think they can be potentially misleading and to help people understand some of the little tricky parts of this hobby that can trip you up if you don't really know where some of these numbers come from. But like I said, this one is about rarity with some of these books. These are a few more modern books, and that's why we want to touch on the whole rarity aspect of it, because there really aren't many books that are, within the last 40 years or so that I would ever qualify as rare. So uh, let's get into this. All right. So before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So this was a Facebook post that I saw, and I don't want to like take away from these books or anything. I mean, the person is clearly very happy with the books that they got, but I also want to talk about why there are definitely some misconceptions out there with rarity on some comics, and that it's not necessarily that the book is rare, it's that there really isn't a lot of value necessarily in the book. And so people don't get it graded because the rarity here that's being referenced is the CGC census. So rarity on the census, and rarity on the census can mean actual rarity and it can mean kind of like false rarity. And so let's get into this. We'll talk about this one here. So these were the two books. We've got an A-Team #1. Now, that is the Canadian price variant. So that does add some rarity into it. We'll get into that. And then we've got a Star Wars #16, and this is the multi-pack edition. And so these are both 9/8. So you could argue maybe they're rare in grade, maybe, but they're both 9/8. They both have signatures. And the comment was unicorns incoming. Can you guess why these are the only signed copies of these books in the world? There were some comments in the chat with this that are a little more snarky than what I'm going to do here, but that were basically, it was like, because you're the only one that sent them in, that kind of thing. But that is, I mean, that really is part of it. And that's the thing that you need to understand when it comes to rarity and the CGC census, because there can be books like Detective Comics 27 or Action Comics 1 or some pre-code horror books or this kind of thing where there's only maybe 50 copies on census or less. Like I think my Punch Comics 12, I think has, I don't remember what it is, like 37 on census. And I would guess maybe half of them are graded. Maybe there's 75 total out there. Like those are pretty rare books that you're not going to see very often, books that aren't going to come up for sale very often, that you can't necessarily just go out and buy if you want them. And whereas this is more like CGC census rarity. So this is now what we're going to do is we're going to start with the Star Wars 16 and kind of see what I'm talking about here. So you can see this is the multi-pack edition. And so to tell that it's this multi-pack edition, it's got this little diamond price up in the corner here, 35 cents. And it's got this white box down in the corner where you might have the barcode, that kind of thing. So we go look up Star Wars #16. And we go onto eBay. And you can see here, I looked up Star Wars 16, 1978, multi-pack edition. Keep going down. Multi-pack edition. Keep going down. Multi-pack edition. Multi-pack edition. Multi-pack edition. See if there's more. Multi-pack edition. Multi-pack edition. Multi-pack edition. I don't even know how many I'm up to now. Another one. Like, there are tons of these available. They're available on eBay right now. I mean, I don't know how many I've hit, 10, 12, something like that. Just scrolling down, and it's like $7 plus shipping. Now, granted, these are lower grade. It says this is a VG. It's not a 9.8. It's different. Like you have different values depending on the grade, but it's not a rare book. It's just that it's not necessarily worth getting the book graded. So if we take a look at the census for this book, you can see that the standard edition currently has 890 copies on census. Most of them are like 96, 98, 94. And I guarantee you there's way more than that out there. It's just that the only ones that are worth grading here are really high grades because there's just the value isn't there to get the book graded. Otherwise, you're going to spend more getting the book graded than the book is actually worth. And then if we go down to the multi-pack edition, you can see there's only 61. So there are 15 times more of the standard. Again, it's still 98, 96, 94. That signature series hasn't been added to the census yet. I don't know why, but 98, 96, 94 are the main ones. I mean, it's mostly higher grade books that are out there for this. And I imagine, I mean, like you saw, like when we looked them up on eBay, there's still a bunch of copies out there. It's not like the book is rare, but it's a little more rare in a 9.8. And clearly, like maybe if that one just got graded, maybe it's the only signature series. And so you could argue that, like, again, that's census rarity. Like it's not a rare book, it's census rarity. And so you've just got to make sure that you can differentiate those two because it does really matter. Like rarity, actual rarity plus value on the census means that you can probably generally trust that census. If the book has a high value on its own and it's rare, it has a low census count, it's probably relatively rare. If it only has a high value when it's in a high grade and it has a low count on the census, it might not be very rare. And to me, that is the case here. Like if I can go onto eBay and do a search and come up with like 10, 12, 15 copies of a book, that is not a rare book. Like it's just, I mean, that's just the way it is. But if we go over to GPA, it doesn't mean that there isn't value to this book. So you can see a 9.8 is worth like $180. There hasn't been a 9.8 multi-pack, looks like, that has sold, that's signed, but a 9.8 multi-pack, 331 was the last sale. So it's maybe about twice as much for that variant of this book. Add the signature, maybe add another $100 or something. So it still has value. It might be like a $450 book. It's not like it's not a valuable book, but I would not call it rare. And so it's just help understand that whole rarity side of things here. Now we're going to go check. So the other book here was this A-Team #1, the Canadian price variant. Not familiar with the Canadian price variants. They've got, I believe the American or US price would have probably been 60 cents. The Canadian price is 75. And so it's got a different price on it. They are almost always newsstands, but not always newsstands. Sometimes you can have direct editions. But if we go over A-Team #1, Canadian, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's see if I don't know if there's any more. This is a newsstand. I can't see all the price on some of these ones, but we'll say at least 6. One of these, this might be a double. I don't know if these are all, probably not. These are probably all unique ones from my comic shop. So, like 6 Canadian price variants, just, right off the bat off of eBay. So again, this one is a 9.8. That is something unique with it. This one is signed. That is something unique with it. But A-Team #1 Canadian price variant on its own is not a rare book. It is not a scarce book by any stretch. And so if we go over and take a look at the census again, we can look at A-Team #1. You can see there's 420 copies graded. Again, most of them are the higher grades. That's where the value is. Go down to Canadian price variant. There's only 20. So about 20 times as many are the standard versus Canadian price variant. You see there's only 198. Again, the signature isn't there, so I'm guessing it hasn't been updated on the census yet. So there's probably 2. I would guess there's 1 universal and 1 signature. So it is rare in grade and rare with the signature, but not necessarily, it doesn't make it rare though. It doesn't mean there aren't a bunch more 9.8s out there. There very well could be, or this could be the only, the one of 2. Another one will never be graded, but that's pretty unlikely. And these books had a pretty large prints, and it's just the value isn't necessarily there to get the book graded. So again, if we take a look at GPA, you can see like a 9.8, $200. 9.6 Canadian price variant. Now, this was during the comic boom, so take that for what it's worth, 312. Considering there's only one, I'm not surprised we don't see it up here for sale. But I imagine if a 9.8 Canadian price variant came up today, probably go for like $400, something like that. So again, it doesn't mean there's not value there. Like there is value even with the signature. It probably maybe goes for 450 or 475, 500, something like that. Like it definitely has value. But I just want to make sure that people that are getting into this, because I see this a lot where people talk about rarity, and it happens in the golden age too. I've had people message me and they're like, "Oh, look how rare this book is. There's only 10 on census." And it's like, that's because there's just not a lot of value in that book. It doesn't make it rare just because the census is low, whether that's golden age, modern, copper, bronze, anything. Like you need that combination of high value and rare on census. And then you can generally trust that rarity a little bit more. But just something that I wanted to point out here, because I do see comments around this a lot. And yes, you can have census rarity, but that is not necessarily the same as true actual rarity for a book. And just try not to get those two things confused, because it can really throw people off, because that's how you end up with things like that first White Vision, where when we had in WandaVision, you had the first White Vision show up, and then that West Coast Avengers book just exploded. And I think there were only maybe like 100 or 200 copies graded on census at the time. Now there's like 2,000 or 3,000. So it's like, it looks, when things will look like they're rare until value explodes. And then all the books get thrown onto the census, and then the value drops back down because people get them graded. And so that's the big reason it's important to understand that, because a lot of people might be hoarding these books or just have them in their collection and just never would have even considered sending them in. But if value explodes, they send them in, and you get this short-term uptick in price. But then when all the books start coming back and everybody's throwing them up on eBay and in auction houses and everything, then the prices just correct back down. And then you get everybody upset and, thinking it's all a scam and all this kind of stuff. So it's better to understand that stuff off the bat, and, how that rarity and price play together. But again, hopefully you enjoyed this video, got something out of it. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and I will see you on the next one.